Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about American politics. We're going to talk about American entertainment, the American entertainment industry. We're going to talk about America's history of conflict and how American entertainment doesn't just carry the history of American conflict to the world, it carries the history of American conflict to Americans right here, right? And how important that is. So let's go ahead and dive right into this, right? So specifically what I want to talk about today is let's talk about American entertainment and one element of it, which is Da Five Bloods, which is specifically Spike Lee's most recent film. It was done for Netflix. I watched it. It's 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. But it really taught me a lot about the Vietnam War, like a lot. And we're going to talk about that, right? So let's dive in. So, excuse me. So, my father served in Vietnam, right? So, you would expect that I would have a good bit of knowledge about what happened in Vietnam and what my father's experience in Vietnam was. That is totally not correct. So what I understand is that the Vietnam War was a war between, that America specifically engaged in, and America decided to fight in Vietnam specifically to push back communism, so that communism would not spread in the world. And so my father served directly in this war, and it was very close to my birth when he was serving, and he spent an entire tour there serving in Vietnam. So why don't I know more about Vietnam? Well, one, I didn't even know about Vietnam until I was at least 5 or 6 years old. And at that point, my father was home, and he didn't want to be talking about that, right? So when I was about between 10 and 15 years old, I was very aware that my father had fought in Vietnam, and that was the time to ask questions. So I did. I asked a few questions. And my father told me very little. Every time I would ask him a question about Vietnam, I would get back 1 to 3 sentences, right? Very short, abrupt answers. And I could tell you what those are, but I'm not going to do that because it's very personal, right? And it only took me 3 or 4 questions to realize this was a topic that my father did not want to talk about, right? And so I know he served. I know he was over there. I know he, was on the ground. He actually learned. Actually, you know what? I'm not even going to talk a lot about the. I'm not even going to tell you the few things I learned from my father about the Vietnam War because it was so clearly personal to him that I stopped asking questions immediately when I was like I asked like 4 questions. I got three sentence answers back, and as little information as he wanted to give me. And then I was like, oh, he clearly don't want to talk about this. And so I stopped asking him, right? And, I'm a smart guy. I don't press people on subjects that they don't want to talk about, right? One thing that's really interesting is what's happened recently with my father and Vietnam. Just recently, I'm 50 years old now, right? And my father is, a couple decades older than me, right? And at this point, my father has gotten to the point where he is a lot more open about discussing all of this. And my kids have started to ask him questions, and suddenly he's just a ray of answers, right? And I'm like, what? Right? Like, and so you would think, oh, well, there it is, Scott. There's your opening. You learn everything you want about Vietnam. And the answer's no. And here's why, okay? So I had a ton of questions about what my father's experience was in Vietnam, and I really wanted to know those answers. But when I asked him when I was young, my father wasn't ready to give those answers, right? Now he's much older and he seems eager to give these answers, right? But now there's a block on my side, right? I'm 50 years old. I've had to go through battles of my own, conflicts of my own, struggles of my own, which certainly don't equal what he dealt with in Vietnam. But there are lessons contained that I could have used for literally 3 to 4 decades of my life. And so if you're giving me these answers now, all I can see is the 3 or 4 decades where I could have learned from your wisdom that is now lost. I'm at the I'm at the second half of my life, not the first. I don't need these lessons now. I needed them then, right? And if there is some profound wisdom, right, now I'm kind of frustrated that I didn't have it for 4 decades of my life. I started asking these questions when I was 10, right? So now he's ready to talk, and frankly, I ain't ready to listen. And that's where we're at, right? So, and these are, and so my father has the knowledge of American conflict. I am a son who wants that knowledge, right? But I can't get it, right? Because before he was blocked, now I'm blocked. Where do we meet in the middle? And we don't. And that's just it. We're ships passing in the night, right? And that's all there is to it, right? But Spike Lee is a bridge, right? Defy Bloods was a brilliant film, and I learned a ton about what happened in the Vietnam War by watching this film. I learned a lot about the dangers that those soldiers faced. I learned a lot about how the war was funded. I learned a lot about the different type of, you know, danger. I learned a lot about the different types of American soldiers that were there. And I learned a lot about the Vietnamese and how they felt about the war, how they feel about it now, how they feel about it then, right? And it's brilliant. And I'll just give you a small example. There's one part of the film is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, where the five Bloods are five African American men who served in Vietnam, exactly like my father, and then go back now, 50 years later, 50 years later, right? Go back to Vietnam and all the things they interact with there, right? And there's this one scene where the five Bloods get on a boat. By the way, spoilers for the Five Bloods, excuse me. And they get on a boat and they just go down the river, right? And on a river market, they're on a large boat, and while they're on that large boat, there are smaller boats that come up to them as they're going down this river market, and people are Vietnamese people are like, "Would you like to buy some oranges?" in a small boat, and it comes right and they're just passing them the boat, and they'll call out, "Would you like to buy some oranges, fresh oranges?" And if the people in the larger boat want them, the smaller boat will actually like kind of moor to the larger boat, and they'll do the transaction right there, right? Or they can stop, the large boat can stop at particular stores that are along the river. And they can literally just jump on, jump off, right? And they can jump between boats, and the boats are surrounded by smaller boats that are bringing goods to them. And the color and I'm going to say the smells. I didn't smell anything. I watched it on television. But when Spike Lee just showed this picture of a Vietnamese person holding up this fresh orange, I could smell it, like the citrus. I could smell this. It was so beautiful in smell and sight and the sounds. It was incredible, right? And it just blew me away. And I was like, I know my father saw this when he was there, and because he was there a few years, right? And this was back then, and this is now, and he never talked to me about this. But this is a common activity there, right? And I just got to see something that I'm positive my father saw, and it really blew me away how powerful American entertainment is. And if you want to talk about politics, right now, the people who are going to vote in December or in November, a lot of them are going to learn more about the Vietnam War from the Five Bloods than they are any book they read, right? Or any podcast they listen to. The power of American entertainment is incredible. It carries our own history to us, not just the world, to us, Americans. And that is powerful because, right, Spike Lee put his own, there's a very distinct political spin in this film, but it's Spike Lee's spin, right? It's his view of what happened in Vietnam, right? And that's a beautiful thing, right? He has built a career that allowed him to do this important film, and millions of people saw it. Now, I hear you. You're like, well, why wouldn't you just read a book, Scott? Right? Well, here's why. I do a lot of reading, right? But frankly, I'm not going to be doing reading about the Vietnam War, and the reason why is I have a hierarchy, right? First and foremost, I read when I put my eyeballs on a book. Almost always, it's a tech book for my job. Okay, I do a lot of reading for, and actually for not even my specific job, for me as a technical professional. That is a number one in as far as the most reading I do. Okay, that's a number one. The most important reading I do every single day is I read my sacred text, my Bible. I'm an evangelical Christian, so I read the Bible, right? And then after those two things, right, I read a ton of comic books. I love comic books, and I just read a lot of them, right? And the reason I do that is to just spin down from all that difficult technical work I do, right? And also from reading the Bible and realizing I'm failing at about 50 different things, right? So I do that to unwind. And you know, frankly, learning reading, I'm just far. We did it. Like, a book never came to the top of that pile for me to read about Vietnam, and instead I learned about Vietnam from Da 5 Bloods. And I'm a reader, right? I've read 500 plus books, right? And I haven't read that many books about Vietnam, right? But I've watched Da 5 Bloods, and I know a lot more about what happened there now than I did before. And so as we think about voting, as we think about how the blues and the reds, the blues Democrats, the reds Republicans, are seizing power for their party now in the political conflict that exists, we cannot forget how important and how powerful the American entertainment system is within that structure, right? I learned more from Da 5 Bloods about Vietnam than my father ever told me, which I'm just like, how did we get here, right? You know, I had so many questions then. He's ready to talk now, but we're just ships passing in the night, man. It's just like, because I know if he told me something that impacted me and had real wisdom, and I know there would be real wisdom there, I would weep for the 4 decades that I did not know those answers. And so it's just challenging. It's challenging. But Spike Lee comes in and, as an American entertainer, forms a bridge, right? And this is a massive impact on our politics. And I'm really, really hoping, and I'm challenging the academic world, the journalism world, the data science world, to really begin to understand that American entertainment has a weight and a density in American politics that is so powerful and so meaningful and so important that we need to begin building disciplines around it to understand it and to leverage it. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your opinion on the topic. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.